Miami and Notre Dame, of course, will highlight week one in college football. We're all looking forward to it, regardless of your rooting interest. And I think the rooting interest here is pretty clear. We talk Canes with you each and every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, Cam Underwood right next to me, edition number 433. Cam, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. Trying out a new, different flavor of energy drink. Usually I'm the yellow can of Red Bull kind of a guy. I just saw this new pink edition, the Wild Berry. Kind of enjoying it. So
nice.
Yeah, just doing that. But otherwise, hanging out, going downhill towards 4th of July weekend. Hope you all enjoy that and everything, and then get to talk with you and everybody about some hurricanes. So everything is well.
I'll have to survey that just because I tap into all sorts of different types of vitamin water types. And that's what I've got sitting next to me right here. One of my best friend's wives suggested this, but it's just a little faint. I don't like it. It's just very suppressed. It's basically drinking water.
Yeah.
Don't give that. Yeah. No, thank you. But
okay.
Worth a shot.
You get one of those infuser water bottles that has like the little cylinder in the middle. And then you put the fruit in and it has kind of that kind of a flavor and everything. But yeah, nice, Jackson Johnson.
I've been into slicing up lemons, drinking lemon water.
Got it.
Not just one slice of lemon, but I'll dice about 5 slices and throw it in a glass of water.
Okay.
It's supposed to be really good for you. So I've been taking on the lemon. All right. What is really good for Miami's recruiting class for 2026 and the build out of this program is to sign really talented football players who are big, strong, and fast. And one of those guys would be Israel Briggs, who plays the tight end position.
Yeah, man. So one of the latest commitments to the University of Miami, Israel Briggs from Visalia, California, in that 6'5", 200, 210 range. For tight end, and as you're seeing on the screen, this is a guy who can really seriously play football. 247 has him as a top 70 overall player. The composite, which I always reference every year, you guys know this. I don't look at one site's ratings. I go across the board. 143, number 7 tight end, number 17 in the state of California. Just check the chat. George asks a decent question there about the simultaneous broadcasting. I would hope. Anyways, but Israel Briggs, he's in that Elijah Arroyo mold. He's thinner than Arroyo, but this is a kid who will grow into his frame. He definitely has the frame to support, 235, 240 pounds. And this is a kid who you probably don't have to worry about going, across country to the University of Miami. It was detailed by a local journalist there. He has had to, grow up quickly, like a lot of us do. His father is dealing with Parkinson's, so a lot of the daily, routines and things Israel has had to take care of. And even for a good chunk of his time in high school, he and his family were homeless. So, dealing with those things, overcoming those obstacles, and still, developing and playing at a high level. He's Darryl Page, talking about I would try to turn him into a receiver. He's not fast enough to play receiver. I was literally going there with my next sentence. He plays receiver in high school. You remember Jaleel Skinner, the 5-star tight end from South Carolina? Like that. Like, yeah, you play outside, but like he plays outside slot. He depending on the formation, he could be 1, 2, or 3. This is definitely a kid who can move and everything. But yeah, he definitely, I think, has the profile to go more inside and be like, if you look at him here, up the seam, up the middle, tripped over the 30-yard or 25-yard line. Shame. But yeah, excuse me. And this is a guy between the hashes. Like, he's that wide tight end stretching up the seam, fake block there, up the middle. I mean, we literally saw Elijah Rowe score on that. Like, literal play. So I know that he's in that 6'5", 200 range. And you think, man, we need a really big receiver. But, like, I don't think that he's fleet enough afoot to stay outside, and then I think that mismatch in the box against linebackers and safeties because you're going to be, bigger than most linebackers and or faster than linebackers and bigger than safeties, that kind of a thing, man. I really think that he will find his home at the tight end spot. And he's a good get and everything. And it's Daryl Page, I love you being here. I love everybody being here. Be sure that you hit the like button and subscribe, all those things. But it's funny because when I was a teacher, I had one specific class of students who were I was so simpatico with them that I would write my lesson plan, and then I would I would leave, I would go home, have dinner, work out, and then I would go back and look at that lesson plan. I'm like, cool, we think alike, and this is where this question is going to be. So let me cut him off at the pass. So I feel that with you, hey, he should turn him into a tight end. That was literally going to be my next sentence, or into a wide receiver instead of tight end. So, I think that we disagree on the wide receiver part of him. But Israel Briggs is definitely a guy who can play here. Definitely a guy that I'm very happy to add to this recruiting class, and continues just to be a positive for Miami as we're on the trail.
All right. Miami also bringing in a defensive lineman out of an unfamiliar territory to Miami for the most part, Arkansas. We will get to that a little bit later in the show, but want to give time to our guest because, again, we get the rare treat of a Miami Notre Dame game, one that we have not seen since 2017 at Hard Rock. That's fondly remembered by Miami fans, of course. We got Brian Driscoll here from Irish Breakdown.
Definitely not fondly remembered by people like me that were in the stadium that day rooting for Notre Dame.
It was a bit
rough.
I'm
sorry. I was in the media. I wasn't rooting for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I was, yes. For me, it was simply not the game that I anticipated. I was expecting, okay, these are two top 10 teams. We're going to see a barn burner here, but it was a barn burner.
You forgot that Brian Kelly was the head coach, didn't you, Mark?
Didn't you? That day I actually allocated someone else from the website to be in the press box because I absolutely said I'm not going to do that. I went up to the game at Notre Dame, some years ago and everything in 16, and then I was like, yeah, we're going to be in the stands in 17. So did that, but it was a great day, and glad to have you join us.
Brian Driscoll, Irish Breakdown. And since I get to talk to Cam every week and Brian and I get together periodically, I rarely get to see these two football minds go at it. So I'm going to lead things off. I'll get it kicked off, Brian, and then I'll let you guys slice and dice the X's and O's because we'll start here. And I'm guessing that your response is going to be based on demographics, based on age range. But when we bring up Miami football, the brand, the U to a Notre Dame fan, what is the response?
I think there's a nostalgia, even for young people. There's a nostalgia of what they think the rivalry was based on what they've seen on TV. It's going back and watching the 88 game or watching Catholics First Convicts on TV and then listening to older people talk about the rivalry. I don't know that they have an actual appreciation of it because, to be honest with you, the best game that the two teams played in the last 15 years was a year where Notre Dame went 4-8. I mean, that was the one quote unquote good game they played. I mean, Notre Dame blew Miami out in 2010. They blew them out again in 2012. They played a great game in 2016, and then Miami blew Notre Dame out in 2017. So, I mean, if you're under 40, how many times have you seen a good Notre Dame and a good Miami actually play each other where it was a good game? I mean, so I think it's more nostalgia than it is, hey, I've lived through Notre Dame USC. I've lived through Notre Dame Michigan. I think it's just a different animal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. We had our opportunities, and I still cannot believe Jamal Carter did not come up with that goddamn fumble in 2016. One of the banes of my existence, like a regret of my life, is having to hear the 4-8 Notre Dame team list Miami as one of the wins in that season. And like I said, I was there. I was at Notre Dame Stadium and yelling at the team and almost got kicked out by the octogenarians that y'all have as volunteers, as ushers and everything. Because I said, yo, pick up the fucking ball. And the guy goes, hey, what are you? look, man. Like, I'm not even talking to anybody. But like, yeah, but having to deal with that. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is more nostalgic from a time gone by. When the teams played a lot, and to your point, also had competitive games, because only one of the last 4 has really been competitive. And yeah, so I'm hopeful that this will be a classic that look, 17 is a classic that I enjoy. I was sitting in the front row. Ed Reed, I've told the story on here many times, was giving a sideline interview with Maria Taylor when Trajan Bandy intercepted that ball, left her with her microphone, hopped over the little half wall, because it was before the remodel. You were there, and came and dapped up everybody in my row, for as Bandy was returning that. So that was pretty cool. But from an X's and O's standpoint, first of all, it hurt my heart that a defense coordinated by Alfred James Golden, who couldn't figure out how to stop a paper bag at Miami, led y'all to the playoffs. So I want to start there. Obviously, with that transition of him going to the, to take a new job and leave, structurally, functionally, from your coordinator, and like what to expect from the defense, because I think that's going to be a key. What are you all bringing into the game? Who are maybe a couple of players to look at? What do you expect from the defense for your Irish?
To some degree, I think Notre Dame's defense is even more of a question mark than Miami's as far as what they're going to look like structurally. Because at least with Miami, you can kind of look at Corey Heatherman and say, hey, look, I can break down film last year from Minnesota and see what he did that worked. Whereas with Chris Ash, you're like, well, where are you going back to? 2020 Texas, where he implemented the defense without an offseason because of COVID? Are we going back to Rutgers? Are we going back to Ohio State? I mean, it's so different. And is he going to have a similar level of adapting to the modern game that we saw Al Golden go through? Where if you look at what Al Golden did at Temple and what he did, where he's a 3-down coach, and what he did at Miami and how he tried to develop that defense with his D coordinator, and then goes to the NFL and he coaches offense, coaches some defense, and then he comes back to Notre Dame and he's running a completely different type of defense than he did before. I mean, he's an Al Groh disciple. This is back in the the 90s, 2000s, 3, 4. I mean, I still remember some of those linebacker rooms they had back at UVA back in the day, with Kai Parham and Ahmad Brooks. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a different defense. And I think the time in the NFL made him a better football coach as far as in the modern game.
Right.
Will Chris Ash have a similar impact? I hope so. But I mean, we honestly don't know. I don't have anything to point to. I can look at some things we saw this spring and really focusing on fundamentals and flying to the football and playing fast. And I think that's, if he's willing to do in the fall what he did in the spring, I think Notre Dame's going to still be one of the better defenses in college football, because the one thing he's got length, he's got speed, and he's got depth. And, Notre Dame has recruited that position extremely well since Marcus Freeman arrived back in 2021 as the defensive coordinator. So it's going to be a very talented team. It's going to be a very deep team. It's going to be a very fast team and a long defense. But as far as like structurally, are they going to blitz as much as they did under Al Golden? Are they going to play as much man coverage as they did under Al Golden? Those are the question marks. But the one thing you're going to see is a defense that is really fast, really athletic. And that's what we saw last year. I mean, I remember having a conversation even with a Notre Dame fan. They're like, I don't know if they can handle the speed of Georgia. And I was like, that's the last thing I'm worried about with Georgia. I'm worried about whether or not they're going to kick Notre Dame's butt in the trenches. Right. One thing I'm not worried about is, can they run with Georgia? And I think that's honestly, Corey, the biggest misunderstanding a lot of people have about Notre Dame now under Marcus Freeman is they still think this is back in the Notre Dame teams. They had big offensive linemen and big defensive linemen, and they're going to ground and pound you. But if they got into a track meet, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, there was a period where that was true of Notre Dame, and they weren't very good. I think when you look at Notre Dame back in the late 80s, I've said this, the reason they could hang with Miami back in the late 80s and in 1990 was where Miami was underrated back then by non-Miami fans was, we all know they had athletes, but they were so good in the trenches, especially on defense, whereas Notre Dame could kind of neutralize that. But Miami was an incredibly athletic team, and people don't realize how athletic Notre Dame was from 88 to 90. And that's what made those games so good. And I think then Notre Dame became this slower, bigger program for over like a 20-year period. And now you look at them and you're looking at Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliama Asa and the guys that bring Jeremiah Love. I mean, when was the last time we went into a season where you could argue that Notre Dame had the best corner and best running back in college football? I mean, you could say maybe it's this, but they're in the conversation as the best player at their position. I mean, you'd have to go back to what, maybe 1992 with Jerome Bettis and Tom Carter, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the difference between this team and past teams.
Got it. I mean, you bring up a lot of great stuff, especially on the defense. Moving on to the offense, I think that, and I mean, you can agree or not, but as I'm looking forward to this opener, I think the blueprint on offense for both teams is the same. I think it's, I think Miami and Notre Dame probably have the top 2 offensive lines in the country going head to head, going to lean on an elite running game. Ours more by committee, yours more from a singular player with excellence. But I mean, backups there, but like ours is definitely more strength in numbers than one superstar guy. And then a new quarterback to our programs leading the way. So, I mean, that's just kind of how I view it. What do you think? And especially, with, as Matt in the chat is saying, CJ Carr, grandson of Lloyd Carr, I mean, is he going to start? Is it going to be somebody else at quarterback? Like, I think the components are the same on both sides. We just know who our quarterback is going to be, who's going to be trying to, plug in and do enough in the passing game. And I think it's very underrated because he's thrown for almost 8,000 yards and 70 touchdowns in his career already, but whatever. But yeah, so what is your thought on the Notre Dame side of things?
Probably not good to get into a Carson Beck conversation with me then, because I'm not a big Carson Beck fan. The only pushback I would give you is I think one of the misconceptions people have about Notre Dame's running back room is that it is Jeremiah Love and then a bunch of dudes. If you look back at Jadarian Price last year, he ran for over 700 yards and had 8 touchdowns and also ran for 6.2 yards a carry. Up until the playoff, he was around 7. So I do think you're talking about 2 guys that combined for 1,800 yards last year, over almost 1,900 yards last year. And I think it was 24 touchdowns. So there is a bit of a dynamic 1-2 punch there. Jeremiah is clearly the number 1 guy. There's no question. It's just I think that there's more of a 1-2. I'm also curious to see how the run game is going to be this year without Riley Leonard. How does that adapt when now you've got more of a drop back quarterback? And no matter who the quarterback is, whether it's CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey, my personal opinion is it's going to be CJ Carr. Okay. But all my sources in the program say, even people that think it's going to be Carr, some think it's going to be Minchey, but they all say it's going to be a battle. Whoever's going to start is going to have to win the job. I just think it's CJ Carr because I just think he's more talented than Kenny Minchey, although Kenny's very talented. And in 3 of the 4 viewings we've seen of them together in the last 2 years, they have like this thing called a jersey scrimmage, which is the week before the spring game that they allow us to be at. Okay. And then of course the spring games, CJ's outplayed Kenny in those instances, but either way, they're going to have a talented quarterback. And although they're both quality athletes, they're not in the same universe as Riley Leonard as runners. Yeah. So how are the running backs going to be without that presence to take that pressure away? I think that's going to be something to be interesting to see. But I think that's where the pass game improving is what Notre Dame's going to do. You've got Jaden Greathouse coming back, who had a breakout in the postseason. Jordan Faison comes back. And then, of course, we're bringing in, Malachi Fields, who's been one of the better receivers in the ACC the last 2 years, despite having terrible quarterback play. And then you're bringing in Will Pauling, who had a down year at Wisconsin last year, but he's a guy that actually played for Mike Brown, who's Notre Dame's current receivers coach. He recruited him to Cincinnati. He then went with Mike Brown from Cincinnati to Wisconsin and had over 70 catches and over 800 yards 2 years ago at Wisconsin playing for Mike Brown. So I think that's the thing that Notre Dame is banking on is they have to be able to take pressure off the run game. You can't just pound teams into submission. You can do it in the regular season, but when you play the Georgias and the Penn States and the Ohio States and the Texas and the Oregons and teams like that, you got to have balance. You got to be able to do both. And when you're playing an Ohio State team, for example, that can do both, you're gonna have trouble keeping up if teams are able to stop your run game. So I think that's been a lot of the focus this offseason is improving that. You've got 2 quarterbacks that are better throwers, but then they really had to upgrade the receiver room, and that's what they certainly did with the guys they have coming back, but then also the arrival of Malachi Fields and Will Pauling.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't trying to disparage the running back room, but like
it's all good.
Of the 6 running backs or whatever, on like the top 3 on each roster, it's your number 1 and then some other guys, whereas ours is very much more interchangeable parts. You know what I mean?
I didn't take it as an insult to Jadarian Price. I just think a lot of people get so enamored of watching Jeremiah Love that they forget that this kid's a pretty good player too. And, And Texas A&M found that out certainly in the opener last year when he kicked off Notre Dame scoring with a 47-yard touchdown run. But I think that's what. But my point is more of that's what makes Notre Dame so good, though. How many teams can take a guy like Jeremiah Love off the field? Take the USC game for example. Jeremiah Love is killing USC in the first half. He's got 99 yards, about over 90 yards rushing. Comes out and on his first carry of the third quarter, he gets hurt. Jadarian Price steps in, and I think he had like 2 carries for -1 yards in the first half, and he ends up with 112 yards at the end of the game. And there aren't a lot of teams that can do that against a quality opponent, and that's what makes Notre Dame so good. And then you go into the Penn State game, and who was the guy that made the big play in the third quarter? It was Aeneas Williams on a sluggo against the Penn State linebacker, and then next play runs outside zone, gets him down inside the 5-yard line. I think that's what makes this room so good is there is depth. It's just that not a lot of people recognize it because none of them are Jeremiah Love. To your point, I mean, he is that alpha dog, but I think that's what makes this room so good is that they have that kind of depth.
Gotcha. How do you, in your perfect world, which would obviously be leading to a Notre Dame win, which I, as a native Michigander and Miami alum, no, thank you, not at all.
I get it from both sides every week as well, Brian. Being an Ohio State guy, so I don't know how Cam and I get along so well.
Still whining about pass interference penalties, Mark. Is that what's going on when you guys talk? Is that what? I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Anyways, like I was saying,
so far, I apologize.
Like I was saying, I'm going to very much ignore that because we got fucking cheated. Anyways, how does this game go from a Notre Dame perspective that leads to a Notre Dame win? You know, like what are the parts and pieces of the game and how this transpires to lead for you guys, towards victory?
I think it really comes down to how well this is a good comment here. How well can Notre Dame's defensive line play against Miami's offensive line? Because I do agree with you. I mean, I haven't ranked my O-lines yet, so I don't know if I have Notre Dame and Miami 1 and 2, but they're on my list of schools that I'm going to be debating on who is my top 5. They're both there. A&M is also on there, who Notre Dame plays in game 2. But that's what we saw last year with their defensive line against Georgia. They ate Georgia up, and they played great against Penn State. The D-line struggled, and Penn State moved them around in the first half and pushed them around a little bit in the first half. They struggled against Ohio State, and you're running on Ohio State. They can't get pressure on Ohio State except when they blitz, and then that leaves you in man-on-man coverage against Jeremiah Smith. That didn't work out at the end of the game. So it's going to be can they win in the trenches? Can they slow Miami's run game down? And then can they get pressure on Carson Beck? You look at the numbers; they're all great, but the one thing you see when you study Carson Beck's film is when he gets pressured, he does not handle it well. And I don't mean pressure of a big game or big moment. You play at Georgia, you can handle that pressure. I just mean physical little pressure. I think his internal clock speeds up too much, and that's where he starts making mistakes, and that's what led to him turning the ball over a lot more last year, getting sacked more last year. He had some really bad drive-killing sacks last year on top of the sacks, so on top of the turnover. So I think it's going to be that. If Carson Beck sits in the pocket and he has time to throw and gets comfortable, he's going to put in work on you. That's just the reality of it. Whatever you think of him, he's a top 5 quarterback or top 15 quarterback. I've got 2 years of film that says if you give that kid time and you don't pressure him, he's going to carve you up. That's what I have. So defensively, it's just going to become that. And then, just limit the big plays. Don't let Miami's run game gash you with the big plays. Make Carson Beck beat you from the pocket. And then if you're going to do that, and it's not so much that it's a lack of faith in Carson Beck, it's a brand new receiving core. He missed the whole spring. We saw this with Notre Dame last year. So this is speaking from experience where it took Notre Dame's pass game a good month to get anything going because Riley Leonard missed the entire spring dealing with an injury. So there was bad timing. There were drops. You couldn't get on the same page. It's going to say, I'm going to make those receivers beat us. I'm going to make the O-line protect the quarterback. Well, I know Miami's O-line can run the football. We got to make sure they don't run the football on us. Looking at it from the Notre Dame coach's standpoint, put them in some uncomfortable situations and make Carson Beck beat us. And that's when your defensive line is going to have to get pressure on him. Because that all sounds great until the minute they drop back to throw and you can't get to the quarterback. And I'm saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have wished for that a little bit. But I think that's the key because, look, any good team that you play, and we could debate on how good Miami is or isn't going to be, but they're a good football team. If you got to be able to take something away.
Mhm.
and then make you beat them with something else. And if I'm Notre Dame in game one, just like if I'm Miami in game one, I'm going to say, I'm not going to let the backs in the O-line beat me. I'm going to make the quarterback and I'm going to make those receivers beat me. And
Okay.
whichever team is able to do that, I think is going to be able to have the most success at stopping the other team's offense.
I largely agree with that. And I don't really disagree with what you're saying about Carson Beck either. I just think, and I said this, in recent weeks to Mark, I just think the pendulum has swung too far to the he's trash side.
Yeah.
I mean, like, everyone has flaws. We know Georgia had their worst run game in 30 years. We know that their offensive line, coached by Stacy Searles, who used to coach here, really struggled despite having 5-star after 5-star after 5-star after 5-star on the entirety of their 3 deep. And Carson tried to do some things that he's not really able to do in repetition, and you saw that go negatively. So
in the most drops in the country.
Yeah. And had them on top of that, the worst drop rate. So now I'm making some plays, hitting guys in the hands, the ball still hits on the turf. What am I supposed to do? So, like, I hear that, but I'm not trying to re-legislate Carson Beck's entire career. I've just heard people who've gone a little bit too far onto the
I think they went too far in one direction, talking about best quarterback in the country, #1 overall pick. I thought that was way too much hype.
I agree also.
I'm with you on that. I'm not a big Carson Beck fan, but I'm not one of those people like, this guy's garbage, he's terrible. Yeah. I question his leadership. That's something
Fair.
I question. I question how he handles certain situations, but I'll also sit back and tell you, and I've said this on my show too, if you don't get to him, he's gonna put up numbers on you.
What's your rough range, Brian, of is he a top 15 quarterback?
Oh, he's definitely top 15.
Okay.
I don't have him in my top 10. We did actually this breakdown, but the guy that does the show with me, Trevor Trowbridge, who's my co-host, had him in his top 5, I think. So I think that kind of shows where he is one of those polarizing quarterbacks. Yeah. And I think part of what some people is, which game did you watch him play?
Just very true.
For me, I haven't, because like I've studied him a lot. But like if you've watched him play some games, like if you didn't turn on the Bama game till it was 28-0, you're like, this guy's legit. But if you watched him, what he did to get to 28-0, you're like, this, and you turn it off, you're gonna think he sucks.
Right.
And that is Carson Beck. It's like he's just that. He's kind of like a streaky, hitter. And that's why you got to get to him, because if you let him get comfortable, if you let him get rolling, you let him get in his feelings, and you let him start feeling good about himself and getting time and rhythm, he'll pick you apart. He's shown that in 2 years at Alabama. I mean, at Georgia. But he also has showed that good defenses can give him problems. Even going back to the SEC title game 2 years ago against Alabama.
No, agreed. I have him in the lower part of my top 10, probably between 8 and 10. Give or take, somewhere in there. Excited
because I have him in that 11 to 15 range.
Yeah, I was gonna say somewhere in that bottom part of the top 10 to 11-ish, like somewhere there. But like, yeah, top 5, I think that's a little ambitious. If he plays to that level, I would be shocked and surprised and very, very pleased by that.
Can I ask you this question?
Yeah. What's up?
Do you guys have, here's my thing, and I'm just looking at this from like a Notre Dame standpoint because of what we went through last year with Riley Leonard.
Yeah. Because
the Riley Leonard we saw in September was not the Riley Leonard we saw in November, December, and January. And a lot of it was because he missed the second half of the 2023 season with the injury. He misses all spring, misses all that time to get on the same page with his receivers. He's got some new receivers to work with. You bring in some transfers, and Notre Dame landed 3 transfers last year, some young sophomores that are talented. And it took them a while. Are Miami, is there a thought that, hey, maybe, whether it's with the coaching staff or the fan base, that, hey, don't expect him to come out in the first 2-3 games and look like, he's going to be contender for the Heisman Trophy? Is it just about, hey, weather the early storm, try to get that early win, and then get him going to where if you can have a 1 or fewer losses by the time you get to the middle of October, now we're going to be a problem? Or is it just like you expect him to look like, peak form, pre-injury Georgia form?
I think that from everything that they're messaging, that the goal or view is that Carson Beck is going to be Carson Beck. Take it for what it will be. I think that's a little bit of state-sponsored propaganda, and I think, like, he is full go in workouts, seen that, heard that, read that, from all kinds of things. But, to your point, we do have, 3 freshman receivers. We have 3 transfer receivers. We have, Miami lost their top 6 receivers, including running backs and tight end from last year. And a lot of them are getting paid to play football now. And then you have Isaiah Horton go to Alabama to be second string, but to play down there.
Still getting paid to play football, just at another school.
Hey, well, in a different way, but his valuation in his mind versus what our valuation of his skills, there was a mismatch, and he went somewhere that could more match what the number was in his head. But you're turning over everything. You mentioned baseball, you're changing the battery too, right? So you get a new center, even though James Brockermeyer, he's been around since 1973 and played at 17 schools,
but not
right?
With this team and this quarterback,
right. Exactly. So you get a new center, but Miami could lose all 5 of their starting linemen from the opener to the NFL after this year, because you have, a 6th-year senior, a true junior who was a 5-star and the top 3 tackle in America in Maui Noah. You have Inez Cooper, who is one of the gems of all gems and developmental guys at right guard, who is a potential top 3 round draft pick. You got Matthew McCoy on the left side. You got a 6'9" monster in Markel Bell over there. So you have that. So it's the structure is there to give the time that Cam Ward was afforded or similar to Carson Beck. But I think something that people overlook when you talk about that is the fact that Cam Ward's singular athletic talents and abilities gave him extra time when things like if the defensive coordinator played the perfect card and said, we're going to do this here, and it's all blocked up and you got somebody running free, he took care of that run free guy. That's not a thing you're going to see from Carson Beck.
That's what's going to be different about both of these teams. Yeah. Because Riley Leonard brought some of that he was a much different thrower than Cam Ward, obviously. Mm-hmm. But where you're like, well, that didn't work. They just let 3rd and 9, they just let a free rusher off the left tackle. Well, this drive's over. Next thing you know, he's running for 25 yards. I mean,
right.
And that's kind of why I've said, look, I listened to Cole Kubelic and Greg McElroy talk about how Notre Dame's got the best offensive line in college football. And I'm like, normally they don't give any love to Notre Dame. Now I'm like, let's pump the brakes a little bit and let's see if these guys can protect the quarterback, because they weren't good at that last year,
Yeah, but I really believe Miami and Notre Dame, our offensive lines, I think are the top 2. At minimum, 2 of the top 3. Sure. I really think the way that we have both recruited it, played, developed, coached, elite of the elite, because it's a focus of both of our programs. So,
I still don't understand how Miami's O-line coach is that good. The first time I saw him, I was like, that's not an O-line coach. That's a special teams coach, man. That cat did not play a minute offensive line in his life.
He did, though. He played in high school. He played on the same line with Cristobal down at Miami Columbus Catholic school and everything. And, he's a pocket-sized 5'4", 5'5". And, I mean, he even to the small linemen, the 6'1" dudes, he's looking up at a skyscraper. But, he is real good, man. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, honestly, as long as, despite the state-sponsored media, or propaganda of Carson Beck's going to be Carson Beck in game 1. If he can be 80 to 85 to maybe 90% of what we have seen, and in a similar way to Cam Ward, they're not the same player, guys, everybody listening, but I'm saying if we can help change his brain to eliminate the drive killer and game killer turnovers, because remember, that was the huge thing against Cam Ward. He's out here gunslinging it, fumbled it 10 times, threw it away 12 times, 14, whatever, and those numbers were less than half in his 1 year at Miami. If we can get to Carson in a similar way and say, cool, get rid of the real stupid stuff that we've seen from you, then I think that puts Miami in a decent spot. Hopefully, we'll be able to find the run game, and then some of these receivers, and there's a lot of them with talent, somebody figures something out. I would say, our more athletic guys, like a JoJo Trader, like a Keelan Marion, who's All-American return guy from BYU who came down, maybe, those would be some of the guys I would say who could find space and really stretch Notre Dame's defense. But yeah, that's where I would be looking. And Richard says, yeah, loved Cam Ward, but hated the hero ball. That was part and parcel of Cam Ward
last year, though, right? I mean,
but we did need it
when you have the defense that Miami had last year. You needed that,
right?
And at times he's going to play in a way that gets you behind 3 touchdowns against Cal. But then you also know that he's going to then go. The hero balls are going to be what leads you to come back and beat Cal.
Exactly.
And you, like, this is what we've talked about this on our show, but remember Dabo Sweeney used to crush the media for that, because they just sit there and whine about all the interceptions Deshaun Watson threw. He's like, guys, this is who he is. Yeah. I'm taking that because he's going to make about 10 plays in this game. They're going to help us go win that football game. And Cam brought that to the table. And I think that's why when I look at Miami, the key is, and when we did our preview of Miami, it came down to their success is going to be what happens on the other side of the ball. I mean, and just to finish off this matchup, the one thing that I think a lot of Miami fans are missing on this Notre Dame team is they don't realize this is not 10 years ago Notre Dame. This is one of the most athletic, most productive secondaries in college football. Right. And I think that's where people are missing the boat. Like this is more like 88 to 90 Notre Dame's team speed on defense, not 2010 and 2012 when Notre Dame just beat Miami up in the trenches, and in the Sun Bowl game where Miami just didn't want to be there. I mean that's
sure
just didn't want. You knew before in the pregame, like, this is not going to be a close game. I think that's.
I always talk about El Paso, Texas, being the worst place in live. I've been there one time.
My first experience 2 years ago was the first time I was there. It was very nice, but it was chilly. I mean, it was cold, and you're walking up that hill to get to the press box, and you're just like, okay, I can only imagine what this was like in 2010. But I think that's where people miss the boat. I mean, this is one of the best cornerback duos in college football coming back. And Don Schuler is a guy that Georgia offered a 7-figure deal to try to get to transfer to Georgia this offseason. And so this is a big time secondary. And I think the pickup of Devontae Smith from Alabama at nickel, just pop into Georgia tape last year, and you're going to see how good of a player he was. So I think that's what a lot of people miss. And of course, you got one of the best DB coaches in the business in Mike Mickens, who's just pumping out big time secondaries every year. And that's also, when you look at this matchup, what I think puts a lot of opening pressure on Miami. I've said this, just looking at it from Miami standpoint, take the Notre Dame part of it out of it. You've got to go 1-1 against Miami and Florida. I mean, against Florida and Notre Dame. You got to go 1-1, because if they can get through that stretch with 1-1 in those 2 games, now they're positioned where now Carson Beck's going into game 5 and 6 and 7, and the young receivers are going into games 5, 6, and 7. You're going into games 5, 6, and 7 in the new defense. That's going to be the key. They just can't drop both of them. If they can win both, obviously that's ideal, but you've got to go 1-1 in those 2 games. And if you can do that, then now all of a sudden Miami enters into the ACC play with a shot to make a run at the ACC title game.
No, I absolutely agree that we have to at minimum split those, games. But, what we were talking about with the secondary, that also puts extra pressure on Carson Beck to perform within the structure of the offense and the running game, which I know Damian Martinez is in the NFL. He was a 1,000-yard rusher, second team all conference and everything. First 6 games last year, Mark Fletcher should have started. Like, he was, 95 yards a game, I want to say, or something, as the second back. But then you have Jordan Lyle, who, has the program record for longest touchdown run. Then you get Marty Brown from North Dakota State, who burst on the scene as a redshirt freshman for them and won the Jerry Rice Award at the FCS level for the best freshman. He comes in, is another bruiser, and then there's other guys there as well. And I mentioned all of them, and Gerard Pringle, a freshman, and Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, a redshirt sophomore, because it's going to take 3 or 4 of those guys making a positive impact in the run game. Because, if we're just going to sit here and say this unproven group, and I don't know if I believe what George just said, but I think in the chat, he's a UF fan who's always in here, but he said, Mario said basically we don't have a number 1 receiver, but we don't have a number 1 receiver right now. We have a bunch of potential guys. So, really being able to not lean on, but be effective in the run game is going to be essential.
Well, Ohio State's still mad that their backfield this year is not Miami's backfield this year. I mean, if you think about it, if recruiting would have gone the way that Tony Alford wanted it to, that's who's going to step into the starting lineup for Ohio State this year. Is the 1-2 is Fletcher and Lyles, because they were both Ohio State decommits, right? And so
that is true. And there are others.
Yeah, there's
Justin Scott starting a defensive tackle, Marquise Lightfoot. List goes on and on.
Yeah, so I think they're going to have to be able to establish a run game early, and I think take pressure off Carson Beck, because this is what kind of gets me sometime in this debate with certain people. Cam, is they'll say, well, Carson Beck is this great quarterback, and they're like, but the reason he struggled at Georgia is because this part of his team wasn't good, and that part of his team wasn't good, and I'm like, well, isn't that kind of true for Miami this year too? Like, they're going to need those other parts to play well. That's true for all quarterbacks. And you can say whatever you want about Cam Ward last year, but he had some dudes he was throwing to as well. I mean, and that's same with Notre Dame and Riley Leonard. I mean, it wasn't like Riley Leonard was just carrying the team and he didn't have Jeremiah Love, and Jaden Greathouse going off on him in the postseason. And that's the thing that with Cam Ward is you're going to have to not ask him to put the team on his shoulders. And if they can do that, then I think Miami will be okay.
Yeah, and I mean that's same for Carson Beck. If it's just going to be, I think he's wearing number 11. So Ken Dorsey's number 11. But if you put it all on number 11's shoulders, like entirely, they're different players. Like I know some of the shenanigans, especially like the Cal game, like crossbody blind throws. That's what got us down by 30. But also he's out there dotting us up and bringing us back. Right. We would never, if we're in that kind of position with Carson Beck, I was very confident, okay, Cam Ward's going to come off the sideline. Let's go get one score, a stop, another score. Blah, blah, blah. If there's a similar situation with Carson Beck, I will not at all be as confident in the path forward. So, yeah, managing the game, not letting it get away from us, not letting y'all double up around, depending on how the coin flip goes, around the half, score, go to the locker room, get the ball back, score again, type of a thing. And the 3-point game becomes a 17-point or 10-point game or something like that, or 13-point, whatever it would be. Yeah, can't really let that happen. But yeah, I mean, it's there. We'll see, man. I mean, especially with this defensive secondary, whereas you are very confident in what you've seen and how it's been built and how it will perform. It is still the great unknown for Miami. I know that we went out and paid a lot of money in the transfer portal, and we got, a bunch of dudes who can hoop and, they can actually really, really play. But, it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's a plan until they get punched in the face. And when this team hits the field, what will actually happen? And I mean, there have been great days at Hard Rock Stadium. There have been some very bad days where we gave up almost 700 or over 700 yards rushing with a team that, hey, we thought was going to be really great. So yeah, the secondary is going to be a big thing. We'll see which way this goes. But I mean, I think that this is not only from a historical standpoint, but in the, universe of this season, it as everybody's been saying in the chat, it is a tough opener, arguably the toughest opener for both teams in the country. And rightfully the Sunday night spotlight game, because I think that you really do have two teams who can and should be pushing for the college football playoff. And then, you just get the history between our teams together. So I'm very, very, very excited to see which way this goes.
Brian Driscoll, Irish Breakdown. Brian, let everyone know where they can find you. Oh, you're muted.
Obviously YouTube, podcasts, Irish Breakdown, just type it in, you'll find us. We have also a channel we're launching called CFB Nation, where we put our Miami breakdown. When we did that a few weeks ago, had some Miami fans in the chat losing their mind because we didn't think Miami was going to score 50 points a game and hold people to 3. So apparently we're underrating Miami way too much. A little bit
seriously,
a little bit hyperbole there. I know, right? Seriously, the U is back, baby. And then obviously you can find me on Twitter at Coach D178. Mark's got it right there. And you can find our podcast at Irish Breakdown 1. I was still mad that somebody took Irish Breakdown, but yeah. But we've been going through like a series, and obviously we did Miami first. Yeah. And then A&M. We just finished up our Boise series. So looking at the schedule of the two teams is very interesting in my opinion, because Miami has a very interesting start. They don't leave the state of Florida till like November, right? And then you get
middle of October.
Where they don't leave the state of Florida. Not that they don't have a home game, but they don't leave because their road game in October is against Florida State. Unless you're one of those people that kind of counts that more as Alabama than Florida.
No, I was just mistaken because I thought there was one a week earlier than it is. So yeah, we don't leave till November. You're right.
And then you've got that really interesting stretch in November where you're on the road 3 or 5 weeks, and then you're going to play a couple cold games at the end of the season, most likely. And then Notre Dame, obviously, I don't know that Notre Dame has any elite teams on their schedule unless A&M or Miami turns out to be elite. But there's just good teams week after week, so they both have, I think, very intriguing schedules and a lot of the same teams, which is going to get interesting when we get down to the end of the season. And I just think when I look at Notre Dame, it's like this is the kind of game you've got to finally start to win. I mean, you talk about what are the things Marcus Freeman has yet to accomplish. And I think games like this are just kind of part of that equation is, look, this is a rivalry game. You've got to get that win. You've got to be able to win your home opener. Marcus Freeman's 0-3 in home openers so far in his tenure. No, 1-2 because they beat Tennessee State in 2023. They lost to Marshall and then lost to Northern Illinois in their home openers in the past. And can you beat A&M? And then with Miami, it's kind of was last year like, and this, I guess my thing was with Miami was last year more about Cam Ward or was it about Miami ascending under Mario? And I think you could say the same about Notre Dame is it was about, Riley Leonard and Al Golden's defense or is this just the beginning of things to come? And I think that's a big question for both teams this season, which I think adds intrigue to this game because win or lose, they both need it to be a competitive game. You've got to avoid what's happened in a lot of these matchups in recent years, and you keep it 4 quarters. Because look, if Notre Dame can get to the playoff after losing at home in week 2 to Northern Illinois, neither of these teams are getting knocked out by what happens in the opener against each other. But you've got to come out of that at least feeling like, okay, we at least did something. We made a statement. If you're Miami, hey, we played the defending national champs down to the wire, or we national runners up. Excuse me, I wish. And for Notre Dame, it's like you got to do something you haven't done in a long time. Last time Notre Dame beat Miami at Miami, I don't think I was born yet.
Yeah.
I'm almost 50. I think it was in the 70s.
Yeah.
So that's just those things is can you start to do the things that your program hasn't done in a long time? That's when you're quote unquote back is when you're doing things like that.
And I mean, like, that's why I haven't said that phrase that you mockingly said earlier, because I don't believe that about Miami.
I hate that phrase,
but
period. Whether it's Notre Dame or Texas, I can't. Notre Dame's back. Okay, then they go play Oregon State in the Fiesta Bowl. And you're like, no, they're not. It's just like, just win a championship, then you're back. For teams like this, for these type of programs.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely hear you. And, similarly, can Miami do what Miami's not done recently? Like all the things you're talking about with Marcus Freeman and, rivalry game and big game to, early in the year and things like that. All of those ring true for Miami and Cristobal. Like, is this okay? We know that the defense last year was atrocious, but was it even more smoke and mirrors? And now it's, 8-4 when the over under is 9.5 on or 10 on every single book. You know what I mean? Is it another year of not making it to Charlotte when, you're up 21-0 at Syracuse in the second quarter and you still find a way not to get there? You know what I mean? Like, is that the,
dude, I covered Notre Dame during the Brian Kelly era. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know that you do, but there are a lot of those kind of similar kind of scenarios and thoughts. So I definitely agree with you from like, or appreciate what you said about the Notre Dame side, but the inverse is a lot true for Miami as well. So this is going to be a huge game with a lot of big stakes. I know that Mario is going to, regardless, it's a process and we're here and we're going to all that kind of stuff, but like, things have to mean something to the players and to the fans and like holistically to the program. Like, if there is no import, if there's no value to it, why are we here? Like, we have, like, this matters. And if you're pounding the podium, Mario, after beating a terrible Florida State team last year so that we beat both Florida and Florida State, right? And you're saying we run this state and if it matters, it matters. So I hope that some of that importance is imbued into this team, because there have been moments when I have felt in many recent years that, I ran my 12-10 comeback route, but okay, we lost and whatever. Like, I just didn't. I need them to care more. And I'm not trying to say it's going to be the same thing as 2017, but it was very, very apparent that Miami cared. And even if we lose, but it's close and you have that buy-in, that's what I would like to see. But also, I need the performance. Otherwise, we're just still here.
I think that's the thing, Cam, that you nailed is like we saw this with Notre Dame back in 2017, and the turning your season around moment for Notre Dame was not a win; it was a loss, and it was that Georgia game where they went toe to toe with Georgia in a game that Notre Dame's coming off of 4-8 season, and nobody their preseason unranked, and Georgia's coming to town, and these 3 stud running backs, and this and that and the other thing, and Roquan Smith and all that, and Notre Dame lost the game. And that at Notre Dame, that's all that matters. But for the players, it was. I remember Drew Tranquil was interviewed after the game, and he had like a hoodie over, and he just was looking down, and he just you're like waiting on him to say something. He goes, "I feel really bad for the teams that we're about to play." Because like you said, that game meant something, and they had that twofold reaction of number one, we're pissed that we didn't win this game, but then number two, we showed we can go toe to toe with a team like Georgia, and that carried him for a while up until he went to Hard Rock in November, but like. That's what fueled that turnaround for Notre Dame. And if you go look at what they did after that, they just ran over the next 2 months worth of opponents. And I mean, I think the next week they ran for over 500 yards against Boston College with Harold Landry, and just I mean, I was at Spartan Stadium, and that was a top 15 Michigan State team. Mark, you probably remember this game, and they're leaving in the third quarter. I mean, that team was just on a mission. So I do think sometimes when you go to toe with a name brand, and you say, we belong in this field. Now let's clean this up. Let's clean this up. Let's clean this up. For a team with leadership, that can be good enough. But what you can also have happen is when you play in a game like that and you get smacked, it can be that sort of that devastating thing for either opponent where you just don't have the confidence you can go do that. And and for Notre Dame, it's a real quick turnaround. I mean, your next game is against Texas A&M, so you better get over however you're feeling about that game. At least Miami has a chance to kind of win or lose, work some kinks out between then and the time that Florida comes to town. Because apparently they're going to beat you guys, according to George in the chat.
I mean, yeah, Georgia.
They almost beat Georgia last year with a third-string quarterback, apparently.
Yeah. But, I mean, it just I am very interested to see particularly how this opener goes because, to your point, in your example, like you lost a game in season and then it turns everything around. Boom. We've been looking at this since the Syracuse game. You know what I mean? Since Thanksgiving week. You know what I mean? Like, so if this has been our North Star to start this season, right? It's not, I mean, it's a singular moment because it's a singular game, but it's not, a championship game. But like, if this is the next thing on the horizon, right? And we've been going towards this, right? And been preaching it. We're building everything in the right direction. We're building this roster, this whole, internal operations. We had to tear it down from what was once here and everything. And we have the quarterback that we want, and we got most of the other players that we want, and we have everything that we need, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Buddy, like, if with all of that time, effort, and all of those resources, if you're not able to show and prove, like, then with what amount of time, effort, and resources will you be able to? Like, I get it that, we've been building, but it's a thing that I've said about Miami recruiting forever. There has to be proof of concept.
Right.
And
why do you think Notre Dame's rolling on the recruiting trail right now? Is it just because they like Marcus Freeman, or is it because they like Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame just gave you a proof of concept last year that they can go 14-2 and beat Georgia and beat Penn State and go to the championship game, go on the road and beat Texas A&M? That's exactly right. And that's the thing where all these programs to be back, you have to start doing that on a regular basis. Because when you were there before, that's what you did. I mean, when you think about, I've made this statement on the show from 87 to, I think it was 87 to 91, Miami won 3 titles. The 2 years they didn't, what happened? What did those seasons have in common? They lost to Notre Dame. Like, and when you look at Lou Holtz's tenure and you look at his record against, I'm making the point that, like, when you're those, don't even get me started on that. Let's go watch that Eddie Brown touchdown in the corner of the end zone. So, like,
but no, that's a valid point. I'm not going to dispute that.
Right.
Also, as well, in addition, Cleveland Gary didn't fumble, but I hear you.
Right. So if you get that touchdown and Eddie Brown doesn't get that one, we're at the same score. But the point is that's when they were running things. And Notre Dame was – why did Notre Dame not win the title in 89? They beat 7 top 15 teams that year. 7. But why didn't they win the title? because they got beat by Miami. And that was my point, is when you have the next year, Miami has 2 losses, the game that kept them out of playing for the title, getting beat by Rocket in 1990. And that, my point is, when you're there, if you look at all the big wins back then, what were those teams doing? They were both independent. They were going all over the country to play everybody, and they were just whooping everybody except each other, right? I mean, and they were kind of going back and forth. And that's when you're back. You're winning titles, and I'm taking on everybody because you aren't going to beat us. If you go look at Lou Holtz's record against top 5 teams his first 7 or 8 years, it was ridiculous. It was like Urban Meyer's. That's when you're back. Right. And I think that's what Notre Dame still has to prove, but I think Notre Dame is closer to it, but that's what Miami's going to have to prove, as you said. But I think that's what makes this game big for both teams is you beat A&M last year, but all of a sudden, if you lose to Miami, then nobody cares as much about that last game. Now you've got 2 losses in a row, and and that's how fans are. But honestly, when you're a fan of Notre Dame or Miami, that's how you should be. You should hold your team to a high standard.
Well, and I mean, on the flip side for Miami, I mean, you lose to Notre Dame, you got 3 losses in a row. Yeah, because then you got Syracuse bowl game, and then didn't make it to Charlotte.
Although I put an asterisk on the bowl game, that wasn't going to be a competitive game if Cam Ward doesn't sit out the second half of the game.
Check back in on this very show. If this were to come to pass and we lose to Notre Dame, there's not a single person in the comments who will be here who will give a single care about that ball, because it's going to, that will turn from the asterisk of, okay, we already knew Cam Ward was going to play a half and and that's going to be then weaponized in a very, very different way. You know what I mean? So it's
here's what you tell Miami fans. Hey, Marcus Freeman lost his first 3 games. I mean, lost to Oklahoma State bowl game, lost to Ohio State, lost to Marshall. I mean, but at some point in time, you've got to get those wins to turn things around.
Right.
I mean, that's the reality.
But in year 4, year 5,
that's where I think can I ask you this? Because I posed this question and I didn't know the answer to this. We posed this question. We did our Miami preview. Yeah. What's the temperature with Mario right now? Like, what is, because I look at it like this. You're in year 4 at the U. In today's era of the transfer portal, I don't want to hear about slow rebuilds at big time programs. I don't want to hear it, like what does he need to do this year to say, hey, look, we're in good hands. We may not win it this year, because I think we would both agree that Miami's not a championship contender this year, barring some things maybe happening that, wow, that's better than we thought, or that's going a little, at least that's the way I look at it. But what does he need to do to say, hey, we're going in the right direction? Like, what is that for him this year? Or is it like, dude, he's just not it? Like, what is that for Miami this year?
Honestly, like, we've been on an upward ascension, like 5 wins, 7 wins, 10. Like, if you're going to be that, Panther G just said, hey, like, Mario just won 10 games. It needs to be that or better. You know what I mean? Like, it just needs to.
So just no regression.
We cannot have regression. Like, I know that most books have the over-under at 9.5. Got to be over.
Right.
And
that's my contention.
And you got to make
Miami's more than 9 over against the schedule they play with all that they lost last year. Then, like, and this is kind of where me and my guy Trevor go back and forth. He thinks he had Miami at 8-4. I think I had him at 9-3 or 10-2. But I think that's the key is if you don't regress with all you lost, then I do think that's actually a step in the right direction.
Yes, no, absolutely. But it needs to be, honestly, 9-3. It would have to be.
That's got to be the floor for you.
It has to be the floor. And it has to be some kind of crazy, close losses. But, like, I really am not accepting of 2 ACC losses, but then I'm very much not accepting losing to y'all and them people from Alachua County. So then is it like, do I take that and then have 1 loss and make it to Sharp? But, like, even come hell or high water or whatever the formation is, I would say that 9-3 has to be the floor, and it has to be that with very, like, the narrative surrounding, if it's 9-3, the circumstances and narratives of the 3 are uber importance, but like 10-2 being the like where the water finds its level, like that's the thing. And we've been hearing this from Mario. Cool, we needed to get the guys in. Ruben Bain's a junior this year. Or Francis Mauinoa, number 61 at right tackle. This is his last year because it's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. Like, you had to get all these guys in. You've done that. we took the stupid losses. You didn't take a freaking knee against Georgia Tech, and everybody. My aunt, who doesn't watch sports, called me that Sunday and said, "Hey, didn't you go to Miami? Isn't that your team? What happened with the?" That was the level of failure that was. That it hit like what ABC Morning News or whatever. Good Morning America. There, Good Morning America had that. That's the kind of failure. But to me, yeah, you have to hit that 10-2 is where water finds its level. You win one or both of these games, you find a way, and you continue to develop the guys at the positions where you really haven't, which to me are wide receiver and in the secondary, because we've had this elite level recruiting. And so you're talking about, we got all the guys, well, not all, but a lot of the guys that we wanted, they're not playing like it. They are on the defensive line. They are on the offensive line. They are intermittently linebacker, but at the, the high skill, positions, you haven't had that. But we need to see that. So all of that putting together, I think that's where it is. But in general, there's no temperature on Mario's seat. We paid way too much to get here. He's buddy with everybody in senior leadership, that bought him up off of his contract in Oregon. So he's going to be here. Now you got to show him prove with wins on the field, my guy.
So at the end of the day, sorry, Mark, let me say Miami goes 9-3. They lose a 4-quarter game against Notre Dame. Okay. Let's say they lose on the road against SMU, who's as good as they were last year, just for argument's sake. And then one of Tech or Pitt on the road at the end of the year, but you beat Florida, you beat Florida State. Do you at least say, okay, we're seeing progress? Because I think if that happens, you're seeing some young guys, your running backs, you're seeing some guys step up. Because I just look at it, I think they actually get, with the exception of Clemson, I think they get several of the best teams in the ACC this year, including a couple. And if you look at what Pitt was before Eli Holstein goes down, like, and if you want to talk about like best linebacker rooms in the country, and cats at Pitt can play now. Like, I just feel like I see a scenario where as long as they're competitive losses, I feel like, okay, I've learned something positively about Mario Cristobal. I even said about James Frank, and Mark knows I crushed James Frank, still do. But I was like, the way they lost to Notre Dame and the way they lost to Oregon, said, okay, maybe that he's starting to figure it out a little bit, where his teams are a little bit more competitive in some of those moments.
The only thing that would be the big negative from your 9-3 scenario is that means we're 9-2 or 8-1, or like we're 8-2 or 9-2, and then lose in November on the road to Virginia Tech a little bit. You know what I mean? Year, right? Yeah. So even if we get there, right, we're in November where championships are won at either 8-2 or 9-2 in the penultimate or ultimate weeks of the season, and you still find a way to like that.
So then you becomes the thorn in the side. Better to like lose to a Louisville than SMU, but then dominate.
No, Louisville. No, not Louisville.
Well, I mean, what are your options? You've got Florida, Florida State, Louisville, Stanford. I don't know. I don't know what your non-late season options are for in my scenario of being 9-3.
Right. None of the above at 10-2. Like that's right. But seriously, that's why I'm pointing at 10-2 as being where things need to go. Because if you continue to lose late in the season, now there's other kinds of things that come into the scenario of, okay, are you able to sustain this greatness? Are you able to figure out how to get your system to work across the entirety of the season? Like, I hear you and completely like
fair. I think 10-2 with all you lost last year and a first-year defensive coordinator. Yeah. I think that's a say, hey, look, Miami's they're at least selling where there's a new floor in Miami.
Yes. 9-3 could also
Freeman did. There's a new floor at Notre Dame of 10 wins. Where like if you can't go below that. I think that was always a problem. Miami's you'd have one good year and then the next year you go 5-7 and Notre Dame kind of went through some of that. Hey, you're in the title game and the next year you lose to South Florida.
Right.
Or actually wasn't South Florida, it was Michigan, early in the season, and you lose to Pitt and teams like that. So I'm with you on that. So I think 10-2 with all you lost and a new coordinator, and just as an outsider, would make me say, okay, I think Mario's settled in well there.
Yeah, I think.
And now it's about finding a quarterback of the future. That which I think they think they have.
We think
the kid coming in, but we'll see.
But but also just to wrap it up, because I know Mark is trying to flag us down for 20 minutes here, but you know, a great
Having a good
conversation with you.
Mark. Come on, man. Mark, you don't
but
bring
no,
me onto your show and think it's not going to go a long time. Come on,
hello, ditto. But I think that you could even, you know, even if it were to be 9-3, I think that there are a lot of positives to be found there. I think that there's a lot of growth and development. And okay, maybe the floor needs to get to 9-3 before it fully gets to 10 wins or whatever. I just, obviously, with losing another game, there's even more negative. I mean, it's just another negative result, especially if it were to come later in the year. There's other narratives and things about the program, its operations, and things like that would come into question.
That's how 2017 was too. It's like, that's why Miami fans love talking about Notre Dame game, because they don't talk about anything that happened after that. I mean, and that's kind of what Brian Kelly went through some of that stuff. Like 2017, Notre Dame was rolling coming into that Miami game, and then they lose 2 out of 3. And now it's like, I don't even want to talk about the last 3 games. I don't know talking about. They didn't play any games after beating Wake Forest. What are you talking about? So I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
There's a pretty conceivable scenario in which Miami loses 4 games, and the 4th is an ACC championship game because they lost 2 non-conference games to Florida and Notre Dame, but they go 7-1 in the ACC, but they've got to face a top 5 Clemson team, and Miami fans aren't going to love 9-4, but they just went to the ACC championship game.
You're putting this Florida loss into the universe, and I don't like that, even as a hypothetical. I know what you're talking about, Mark. I'm a guy
I
of
feel like
scenarios.
that would be perceived as a big step back. Losing at home to Florida after what you did to them at their place, I think, and then especially if you also lose Notre Dame like that, that's when I think things start to temperature a little bit.
And then you have, and we're one of 3 things that have it. We, after the Florida game, game buy. So you got 2 weeks in 3 where there's nothing to do but hop on here Tuesday night at 7 and talk about the way that things are going wrong.
Oof. Don't ask me to come on that show.
Okay, I'm gonna pull that one back out of the universe, and I'm gonna interject what I originally was going to interject. That just flew out at the last second. What the hand gesture was for about 10 minutes is, you know, like a caller asked me a couple hours ago about Luke Fickell. What's he need? What would be your evaluation on Luke Fickell going forward this year? So I'll say it this way, because you guys kind of danced around it. For me, there's a lot of teams in college football from year to year that finish with an 8-4, 9-3 record, and they play a couple games that are significantly at a higher level of opponent than everything else. And I think Miami usually falls into that, where they've got about 3 games where they play really strong competition, and then there's a drop. And it's the Virginia Techs and the Georgia Techs and the Virginias and that they should take care of. So it's more about, yes, the first criteria is always, what's your record? Tell me your record. Don't tell me anything else. Let's start with a record. Absolutely. But for me, it's then let's evaluate how competitive is this. One of those 9-3 teams that's a bit of smoke and mirrors. They weren't really that good against the good teams, and they beat everybody they were supposed to, but there's still this wide gap between them and the elites. Or is it a 9-3 where, oh man, they took Clemson to the wire in the ACC championship game. They took Notre Dame, who then went to the semifinals of the playoffs, to the wire, and they're a really good 9-3 team.
That's how I was looking at it, Mark, is like, if you lose to Notre Dame in a close game, you lose to SMU in a close game, and you lose to anyone other than Florida State in a close game, that means you would still have, so let's say it is Pitt in my scenario, that means you still beat Florida, you still beat Florida State, you still beat Louisville, and you still beat the other of Virginia Tech and Pitt. Like, with all you lost, I just feel like that would say, like, okay, they're at least treading. That's what I say, that new floor, that you've got to set the new floor before you can reach your ceiling. And that's why I think that the 2013 season was so important for Notre Dame to finish the way they did, because it set a new floor to where they were on the verge of, I mean, you lost to Clemson and Louisville, and it's like, okay, where's this thing going to go from here? And then, of course, that changes.
Yeah, and I mean, 9-3, I mean, I have been tough. I am tough, but it is not, the sky is not falling at 9-3.
Yeah.
But at the level that we aspire to be,
sure,
when you're, between 9-3 and 10-2,
Yeah.
we're firmly in hair splitting territory. I mean, I know I don't have any myself, but we're firmly in hair splitting territory now. And those kind of things, those small details do matter and make the difference. So yeah, I mean, it could come to pass with that scenario and things. And I do think that 9-3 or 10-2, somewhere in the, I mean, as long as it's on immediately either side of the over-under number, like if our over-under is 9.5, which it is, I don't need to see no 7 or 6 this year. You know what I mean? Like,
isn't that
6,
what
7,
Schnellenberger did though? I mean, he set a new floor at Miami. It
Well,
didn't happen
absolutely.
overnight, but it's like, okay, 9-3, 9-2, and then you had the one small dip. And then, I mean, I think that's what you got to do at a place like this that's been down for as long as it has been. That's what Brian Kelly did at Notre Dame to a degree also. I got to give him credit for that. Is the floor was like when they went 9-4, you were kind of like, what the heck happened? And I think that's kind of where Miami is. And somebody asked, what about Notre Dame at 9-3? All heck is going to break loose, because that's the whole point is you've set the floor here. You've got to stay within that. So it's like if Notre Dame goes 9-3, well, no, the floor is you got to get back to the playoff because of what you just did. And that's the thing is once you set the floor, you've got to stay close to that. Whereas Miami going 9-3 is not a big drop off, in my opinion. Especially with all they lost. Notre Dame going 9-3 with what they have coming back is what the heck happened? What happened to this football team?
We're also in a new era where a few years ago, 9-3, 10-2 was just simply a psychological thing. Oh, we want double-digit wins. It looks nicer. It looks good. 10-2 versus 9-3. We might be number 8 in the country instead of number 13 in the country. But we're looking at a very close to that being the delineation between you make the playoff, you don't make the playoff. And I know Miami missed at 10-2, but for the most part, there's a 10-2, 9-3 separation that we're going to see going forward.
Right. And we're already, again, the comparison for Miami last year should have been Tennessee at 10-2. But because, say whatever you want. I know that there's Miami hatred out there. It's fine. I'm good being jerks. Like, hey, we'll be the bad boys of college football. Like, you don't got to like us, but it was just very clear up front when all of a sudden the conversation was a 10-2 Miami with a 9-3 Alabama team fresh off of getting their doors blown off by an average Oklahoma team on the road. And that's where, again, even if you're at that level of 10-2 and on the outside immediately and put below teams from other conferences with more losses, which is why we play the game, 9-3 then is it could be the scenario and we could forge a path forward. It just adds another dimension of challenge and scrutiny that you will have to overcome in team building, in recruiting, in everything going forward, because we've had the talent that we've had the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's fair.
Brian, we so much thank you for dropping by. We wanted to hit this one early. We may, if you have time, get you back right before the game that week, if we possibly can.
I think I'm flying down Friday, so I'll be around that week.
But everybody, Irish Breakdown, and it goes so far beyond Notre Dame. Brian and the rest of the staff really slice and dice college football across the board. So it's a great, great listen, everyone.
We're doing our live pass catcher. Top 10 pass catching units is going to be our CFP topic tomorrow. Receivers and tight ends. So yeah, it's going to be we did running backs last Thursday and quarterback. We did running back units last Thursday and then top 10 quarterbacks the week before.
Nice.
So yeah,
we'll be checking it out, Brian. Thank you so much for stopping by, man. It's always good to see you guys.
Nice.
All right, good stuff out of you too.
Absolutely. That was a great conversation. I was very surprised when you texted me earlier. You were like, hey, we got a Notre Dame guy. And I was like, July 2nd? Like that was the thing. I looked at my phone. I was like,
early preview.
Yes, very early. I was like, yeah. I mean, we, do have an early preview of the game up on StayWithYou.com as we're working our way through our summer stuff as well. I just, wasn't expecting that. But no, Brian was very knowledgeable and definitely would welcome him back, for another conversation. I know that I've put the kibosh on some other people coming back on the channel, but I found great value in that. I thought that was really, really interesting and engaging on both sides. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that. I really, really did. That gets my my brain going and everything. Before we get out of here, I did want to just circle back on Anthony Kennedy Jr.,
Absolutely.
the defensive tackle commitment from this past week. Big kid. 6'4", 334 from Little Arkansas Rock. Let's try that again. Little Arkansas Rock in the world. Little Rock, Arkansas. You see on the composite, he's a 3-star, 247, has him as a 4-star. A top 10 player in the state of Arkansas. This is definitely a needed get. You have him in this class at defensive tackle. You also have, the other guy. I was just looking at the list, Tyson Bacon from Hoover, Alabama. Also, I know that there were some people, New King God, I believe, who was in the chat before saying Miami just needed to take, more developmental guys, or like there's been no defensive tackles in this. Like, that's simply not true. Now, we haven't gotten everybody, but if you look at this, this is a big kid moving like that. You know what I mean? So getting him in this class is really nice. I believe that, sorry, I got to go back to his page, over Missouri, which is the other team that he took an official visit to. So yeah, big upside. And he's just a big kid, and he moved, like, he plays inside and out at the high school level. So tackle and edge, which is, I mean, for somebody that size, that's craziness. So you see him making a play here in the backfield. So yeah, man, you make your hay where you can, and you get the guys that you can get. And I really like this take in a vacuum by itself, as in not paying attention to anybody else on the board. I like this eval. I like this take. We can talk next week about the state of affairs in terms of recruiting overall, and especially at positions of need like defensive tackle. I know people are mad that James Johnson didn't come to Miami. He attends Miami Northwestern, but like, he's not a Miami guy. Like, I look at him like an IMG Academy guy, originally from New Jersey, moved to North Fort Myers, was there for a couple of years, moves again and transfers to the West. Like, he goes to school off of, Northwestern is south of Central. So he goes to school on 79th Street. Miami Central's up on 95th Street. I have no idea why Central is north of Northwestern, but I digress. But he goes to school down there. As of January, like, he's not from here. Is it still a recruiting loss that you would have liked not to have taken? Yes, absolutely. Who knows where Calvin Russell's going to go? Probably not Miami. Who's looking at these, like, I have my questions about the current state of affairs. Miami, everything I have seen, heard, and read was pointing towards July, a big run. It's going to be this blockbuster, basically get everybody type run and push towards the number one class in America. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. I'm hopeful about Derek Cooper from Chaminade. And then maybe you get another one, and then, clean up on some of the other B tier prospects on the list, and then set a course for the regular season. But we will see. But I just wanted to give Anthony Kennedy his due, because I know that he got preempted by that great conversation with Brian from the Notre Dame side of things and whatnot. And yeah.
So everyone that checked us out on the Notre Dame channel, keep in mind, if you just love college football talk, you can join Cam and I. Just flip on over to the Miami channel on Wednesday nights. We do this every Wednesday with Miami football talk. So we welcome all fan bases. So Notre Dame fans, jump on over Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time, talking Canes, and understand your opponent for week 1.
Absolutely.
All right.
Get more insight there. So yeah, man, it's been a pleasure. I know that we went a little bit long, but as you see on the screen, my ad on Twitter is Underwood Sports, the website that I manage, stateoftheu.com. Please come over and fan with us. We have a ton of great stuff up there. Our next installment of Summer Scheming, I believe, hits tomorrow, from Justin DeTavio, where we look at the X's and O's of all of our opponents going into the year, position previews, player profiles, and even more. And we actually did best case, worst case scenario on Monday with Craig T. Smith for Miami season. What is the best case, worst case? Click on the link, stateoftheu.com, and then you will find out. And on behalf of Mark, for myself, and Brian, thanks so much for watching.